If you're earning around $80,000 to $100,000 in Australia, there's a single career move that often adds about $20,000 without working longer hours. Most people never see it, not because it's risky, not because it's complicated, but because they've been taught to look for income growth in the wrong place. And once you understand how salaries are actually repriced, this becomes very hard to ignore. In the last video, we talked about why so many professionals end up underpaid without doing anything wrong. Today is the practical follow-up, because once you understand how salaries are actually priced, one pattern shows up again and again. The biggest income jumps rarely come from annual raises. They come from moments when your role is reevaluated by the market, and most professionals only experience that kind of repricing once or twice, often by accident. That's why income growth can feel random. It isn't. It just follows a different set of rules than most people are taught. Most professionals aren't underpaid because they made bad decisions. They're underpaid because they followed the path they were explicitly encouraged to follow. The advice usually sounds sensible. Do good work, build expertise, become dependable. Over time, responsibility increases. Expectations increase. The scope of the role expands, and quietly an assumption forms that pay will eventually catch up. The problem is that inside organizations, pay doesn't catch up automatically. It moves according to internal logic, not personal contribution. Most salary systems are designed to prioritize stability. Budgets are set annually, increases are capped, and adjustments are framed as percentages, not reassessments. 3%, 4%, maybe 5% if conditions are favorable. Those numbers feel reasonable in isolation, but they compound slowly, especially once your salary is anchored. And that anchor is powerful because every future increase is calculated from where you already are, not from what the role has quietly become. This is where the mismatch starts. Over a few years, many professionals end up doing work that would be priced very differently if it were advertised today, but they're still being paid according to an older version of the role. From the organization's perspective, nothing is broken. The work is getting done. The employee is capable. The cost is predictable. From the employee's perspective, something feels off. The workload feels heavier. The responsibility feels broader. And yet, financially, things feel oddly tight. This is the moment many people internalize the wrong conclusion. They assume they need to prove themselves again, be more patient, wait for the next cycle. But what's actually happening isn't a performance issue, it's a pricing issue. And as long as you stay inside the same structure with the same salary anchor, the system has very little incentive to correct it. This doesn't apply to everyone. It's not for people early in their careers, still building core skills. And it's not for executives already negotiating at the top of the market. This tends to apply to professionals earning somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. You're competent, you're trusted, you're relied on. You're the person who gets asked to step in when things matter. You know the systems. You understand the work beyond your job description. You've probably been in the same role or the same organization for a few years. Over that time, the role has quietly expanded. What used to be helping out is now expected. What used to be optional is now your responsibility. But when you look at your pay, it hasn't shifted in a way that reflects that change. And this is the frustrating part. You're not struggling because you're careless. You're not bad with money, you're not doing something obviously wrong, you're doing well, and yet things feel tighter than they should. If you've ever looked at similar roles elsewhere and quietly thought, that number's higher than mine, but then dismissed it as unrealistic or risky, that gap is who this video is for. The core problem isn't effort, it isn't loyalty, and it isn't performance. The core problem is that most salaries are anchored, and once that anchor is set, it becomes surprisingly difficult to move. When you enter an organization at a certain number, that figure becomes the reference point for everything that follows. Raises are calculated from it. Promotions are negotiated from it. Future budgets are justified around it. Even when your responsibilities change meaningfully, the salary attached to the role often doesn't reset. Instead, the organization treats the change as an extension of the existing role, rather than a new one that needs to be priced again. Over time, this creates a widening gap between what the role is worth in the market and what it's actually paying. This gap isn't accidental, it's structural. From the organization's perspective, repricing roles internally is costly and disruptive. It creates knock-on effects, it raises questions about internal equity, and it sets precedents that are hard to contain, so most organizations avoid it. Instead, they rely on predictable, incremental increases, percentages that feel reasonable in isolation, but compound slowly over time. The longer you stay anchored, the more these small increases fail to reflect reality, especially in roles where scope expands quietly, where new responsibilities are added without the job title or pay structure being formally revisited. This is why capable professionals often find themselves in a strange position. They're doing more complex work than they were a few years ago. They're making higher impact decisions. They're relied on more heavily. Yet financially, they feel static, not because they've stopped growing, but because their pay has stopped being recalibrated. And crucially, this isn't something effort alone can fix. You can work harder, you can be more reliable, you can take on more responsibility. But as long as your salary remains anchored to an outdated reference point, those gains are absorbed without being repriced. This is the trap many professionals don't realize they're in. They're trying to solve a pricing problem with performance inside a system that doesn't reward that combination. The lever that breaks salary anchoring is simple: external repricing, not chasing promotions, not squeezing out another small raise, but deliberately placing yourself back into the market where roles are priced based on current demand, not past history. When you move externally, your previous salary loses its power. The new organization isn't anchored to what you earned last year. They're anchored to what the role is worth right now. That's why external moves often produce step changes in pay, even when the work itself looks similar. Same skills, similar responsibility, different price. This isn't about job hopping for the sake of it. It's about timing. Professionals who make this move at the right moment, after their role has expanded, but before they become too anchored, often see the largest gains. The market is effectively recalibrating them, not rewarding effort, repricing capability. And because this repricing happens at the point of entry, the increase tends to be durable. Future raises now compound from a higher base. That's where the $20,000 gap comes from. Even when people understand this, many still hesitate, not because the logic is unclear, but because the move collides with something deeper than logic. Leaving a role where you're known carries a specific kind of discomfort. You're no longer the safe pair of hands. You're no longer the person who knows where the problems are buried. You give up familiarity, you give up context, and for a while you give up certainty. There's also an emotional layer that's rarely acknowledged. Loyalty feels like a virtue. Staying feels mature. Walking away can feel like impatience or even failure, even when it isn't. Many professionals have been rewarded for being steady, reliable, reasonable. So choosing to leave can feel like breaking an unspoken rule. Underneath that, there's a quieter fear that once you step back into the market, your value will be tested. Staying protects you from that moment. You might be underpaid, but you're competent, you're respected, you know where you stand. Moving introduces uncertainty. Will the market value me as highly as I think? Will I be exposed? Will I regret it? So people delay, they wait for the next review, the next restructure, the next natural moment. And during that waiting, nothing actually changes. The role continues to expand. The anchor stays in place. What feels like caution slowly becomes the thing that keeps them stuck. The important thing to understand is that none of this is a personal failure. Being underpaid isn't a reflection of your ability. It's often the result of timing and structure. Once you see how salary anchoring works, the $20,000 move stops feeling dramatic. It's not about chasing money. It's not about proving anything. It's about recognizing when your role has quietly outgrown its price and allowing the market to reevaluate it. For many professionals, that doesn't require a reinvention. It requires a reset, a moment where capability is priced based on what it is now, not what it was when you first entered the role. When that happens, income growth becomes calmer, less emotional, less reactive, and more deliberate. The people who make this move successfully aren't reckless, they're measured. They wait until the mismatch is clear, and then they act, not out of frustration, but out of alignment. So to recap, if you're earning around $80,000 to $100,000, feeling stuck often isn't about effort or performance. It's about timing. When roles expand without being repriced, salaries become anchored, and income growth stalls quietly. The $20,000 move isn't dramatic. It's the moment you allow the market to reassess what your role is actually worth. But understanding that move is only half of it. Where most people get it wrong is how they do it. In the next video, I'll break down how professionals identify higher-priced roles before they move, and how they avoid resetting themselves into a new anchor. That's where the real leverage is.